Hi, Daniel. So, starting this second session, I have a couple things that I want to talk about from the last week, what we discussed. But first and foremost, I want to see if there's anything that you wanted to discuss or anything that you were unclear about last week.
Nothing. Can you just, if possible, can you repeat the goal for this therapy?
Yeah, so I'm still in the process of getting to know you. We're kind of building that relationship. So my goal for today is to just kind of get you to better understand me and how I'm going to help you through this process.
Okay.
Kind of build some trust there.
All right.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
So was there anything that you want to talk about from last week?
I got to hear less voices.
Less voices?
Yeah. But I still get distracted by other noises. Sometimes they get amplified, just as I mentioned last time. So, for instance, right now it's fine, but when I was working a few days ago, I could not focus on my work because the fan in my office was too loud. Although it wasn't really loud to other people, it was amplified in my ear. So.
Okay. So was there any way that you could turn this fan off?
Yeah, I tried. I turned it off, and I was just didn't want to act abnormal to other people.
Okay. So you did get to turn it off, but
after a few hours, because I wasn't able to work for a few hours because of the noise. So.
Oh wow! So it's distracting you to the point where you can't get work done. Wow. So even after you turned it off, was the sound still there?
No, it actually went off.
Okay.
Went away, so.
Okay. So it sounds like when there is a sound, you do have the capability of kind of shutting it out, but it's just super distracting to you.
Yes.
Kind of takes over your entire thought process.
It takes me a while to figure out which noise it is at first.
Oh, okay.
Because it's just so loud. At first, I'm just distracted by it. Don't even know what the source is. And then I gotta look around to see what the noise is from, where the noise is coming from. So.
It sounds very overwhelming.
It is.
Kind of anxiety provoking. Yeah. Okay. So let's say that you're in a situation where it's not a fan, it's not something that you can just shut off. What do you do?
I try to focus on something else, or try to leave the room after a few hours.
And that helps?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm getting a better picture of that. You mentioned that the voices have been better, though?
So I don't, nowadays I don't really hear voices in my head. So that's really good.
You haven't heard any voices at all?
I did hear a few voices, but this doesn't come as often as it used to. So.
Okay. Well, that's a step in the right direction. So could you maybe tell me when you did hear the voices a few times, what they said?
Well, it told me that my family's in danger now.
Okay.
Chased by the Iraqi government.
Okay.
But after this therapy, I realized it's more delusional than, whether it's real. It's not really real, right? So, try to fight back the voice. And sometimes it goes away, sometimes it gets louder.
So you're recognizing that these voices are very real in your head, but not necessarily real out in the objective world.
Yes.
Okay. So do you kind of use the same strategies with these voices as you do with the noises?
Actually, the voice follows me around, so I have to fight back. Sometimes I talk to the voice, which makes me kind of, crazy to other people. So I try to do it when nobody's around.
Okay.
When somebody's around, I try to not look distracted, but I do look distracted sometimes.
So you're not just talking back in your head, you're actually verbally responding to these voices. So I'm wondering, do you do this at home?
Not in front of my kids or my wife.
No.
I don't want to open it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was actually another question that I kind of wanted to get into from last week. I wanted to see if there have been any major events or any improvements or anything worse in the relationship with your wife or your sons?
We're still the same.
The exact same?
Exact same.
Okay.
Yeah. I always try to talk to them, but they don't really respond back
Okay.
a lot, or in a long-term sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing that they don't completely ignore you, but they're not giving you any kind of meaningful conversation.
Yep.
Okay. And that's something that bothers you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to have those kind of conversations.
Yes.
Okay. So let's come back to that later. I want to kind of address some other things, and I think it will weave into how we're going to work through that relationship.
Okay.
So I kind of want to get to know you, like, what are your interests or hobbies, or what kind of things do you do when you're just at home?
I sometimes watch the news.
Okay.
To see how things are going. I'm in social network all the time. Try to see how my friends are doing in the military, how my kids are doing. Because they add me on Facebook and Instagram, so that's the one way I can interact with them.
Yeah.
Besides that, kind of lost interest in things I used to, like hunting and other sports.
When did you lose that interest?
After my friend's funeral that I mentioned last time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when I began to lose interest in things I used to.
Okay. So, before the friend's funeral, you liked to go hunting, you liked to hang out with your friends more, but now that kind of desire isn't there? Okay. So I'm wondering if any of those hobbies that you had before, did you do that with your family members? Did they?
No, actually, I did that with my friends in the military.
Your friends? Okay.
I didn't really do a lot of spend leisure time with my family members.
Okay. So last week you mentioned that you get to see your military friends about once a month. Did you get to see them in the last?
No, I was too busy with my work because I'm kind of behind in my work because of the voices.
Okay. So
I'm trying to finish it up in my house or stay at my workplace a little later than usual.
So that sounds like it's just an additional stressor too. Not only do you have these voices that are preventing you from getting your work done on time, but then you have to take your work home and put in the extra time and effort because you just can't get it done during the day. Okay. Do your sons or your wife, do they comment on you having to bring your work home now?
Actually, my kids are in sports.
Okay.
During sports, they play football in school, so they come home late. And I usually try to finish it before they come.
So they don't really have any idea that this is going on?
No. And it's easier for me to work by myself because I don't hear voices.
So do you have an office at your house that you work in? Or
just my room.
In your room?
Yeah.
Okay. So your wife realistically could come in and see you still doing your work?
Yeah. But she's usually with the kids.
Usually with the kids at practice. So I kind of want you to imagine that you're sitting in your room doing your extra work, and your wife comes in and says, Daniel, what's going on? Why are you doing your work? It's 8 o'clock at night. Why didn't you get it done during the day? What would you say to her?
I would say I wasn't able to finish it at my workplace because of the low amount.
Okay. So you wouldn't.
I wouldn't mention about.
You wouldn't mention the sounds or the voices. You would just kind of deflect it to another reason. Okay. And you think that she would accept that answer?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So last week we talked about, having more open and honest kind of conversations with your family and trying to repair those relationships. And I hear you loud and clear. You don't want to talk about these, the voices or anything like that. But I'm wondering, how would it feel for you if you said, instead of talking about the voices, just saying, I'm distracted at work?
Um, I'm scared that my kids or wife would ask me to define what distracts me,
Okay.
and I end up telling them what's going on in my life.
Okay. So let's play this out a little further. So you do say, "Oh, I'm just distracted at work," and your wife says, "Well, what are you distracted from? What's going on?" How would you answer?
I'll say I'm just stressed,
Okay.
and it's hard to concentrate when people are around.
Okay.
So I like to stay in a quieter place.
Yeah. And those quieter places do help you get more work done,
Yes.
and they do help you kind of stay away from hearing these extra things. Okay. Do these quiet places, so we're seeing it in a positive light right now. We're seeing, all the good consequences of kind of being away from everybody else. I'm wondering if you see any bad consequences of that happening, of you kind of being away from others and being in a quiet space by yourself.
I guess I do have a little depressive. I do get a little sad when I'm alone, but being sad is better than being distracted by the voices, I feel like.
Can you elaborate on that?
So, me isolating from other people makes me, sad, a little depressed. But I feel more comfortable not hearing the voices.
Okay. So being sad is a more comfortable thing for you than having these voices and sounds constantly in your head. Okay. So that example just kind of amplifies to me how distressing these voices are to you and how, it's really impacting you mentally, emotionally, physically, pretty much, if you're not getting your work done, right? So, I'm curious as to what other options you think we could try to utilize to get these voices or these sounds to lessen even more than what they have. Is there anything else that you can think of that would help get rid of these sounds or these voices?
When I'm extremely focused, I don't really hear these voices. But when I'm zoning out, I start to hear these voices. Or when I'm a little anxious, when I'm around my family, I start to hear these voices more often, I feel like.
Can you describe to me what it's like when you zone out? You're telling me that you hear more voices, but what is it that you're thinking about?
I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm really in a state of mind where I'm not thinking of anything, and all of a sudden something pops out and it distracts me.
So when you're in these kinds of periods where you're zoned out, you're not really thinking about anything, can you describe what it feels like to me physically? Do you have any sort of physical symptoms that come along with that?
What do you mean, before zoning out?
Yep, so some people, when they have anxiety about something, they have similar symptoms where they feel like they kind of black out. They don't know what's going on. They start to feel super anxious, and maybe they start getting a really bad stomach ache, or maybe they start sweating more, or they feel super fidgety. And that's not to say that this is happening to you because of anxiety, but I'm just wondering if you have any type of physical symptoms like that.
Yeah, so whenever I hear voices, I start to get alerted. Like, I realize that when I hear the voice, I instantly try to find the source of the sound. Unless I'm with a lot of people, if I'm surrounded by a lot of people, I consciously try to not look for the voices or the sounds. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I don't want people to think I'm crazy.
Okay. You don't want people to recognize that you're looking around for these voices. And you think that they would consider you crazy if they knew that you were hearing voices. So do you remember what we talked about with voices last week when I told you that trauma can induce voices, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy, it just means that you've been through some things?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you thought about that anymore.
I mean, I still sometimes believe that it is a symbol of weakness, because in the military, when you have these kind of symptoms, you're automatically out from any kind of mission. And I thought, or I still think, that it's an act of weakness to get out from your duty, your obligation. And I don't want to be recognized or labeled as that kind of person by other people.
So, sounds like you think that being in the military is kind of like the highest form of strength. That's okay. And so these voices are something that would take you out of the military, and therefore you'd be weaker.
Yes.
Okay.
Or not necessarily just the military, but overall, from my obligation is.
And by your obligation, you mean
working, being a father, being a husband, being an employee.
So you're all of those things right now, and you're still hearing voices.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
But at least I know for sure nobody's thinking me as,
Okay. So it's okay that you are hearing voices right now because you are the only one that knows it. But if other people were to find out, then it would really become a problem.
I don't want people to judge me.
Okay.
Or consider me as a weak person.
Okay. I'm wondering what else do you define as weakness?
Not able to do what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
Not able to meet the expectation of others that you're supposed to meet.
So, have you always thought of weakness in that light?
I think I gradually began to think it that way. Like when I was deployed to Iraq, one of our soldiers purposefully faked his mental symptoms and got out of the mission. And I've seen a lot of people who try to fake their PTSD to get more benefit from the military, to get out from the military honorably.
Okay. So, your experience previous to the military, you don't think that you necessarily saw weakness in that light, or you just don't remember? Not sure.
Not sure about that.
Okay. Kind of what I'm getting at is I want to learn more about your life prior to the military. I want to hear, about your parents. I don't know if you have siblings or anything like that. I'd love to learn more about how, things were in your world before the military.
Oh, okay. So I didn't join when I was 17. I joined when I was 20.
Okay.
After I finished my associate degree in community college. And my parents were immigrants from a European country, Poland. And they're strong Christian, and I have two brothers. They're really successful. Physician. The oldest one is a neurologist and a professor at a pretty prestigious university, medical school. And my other one is also a professor at a business school. And I wasn't really good at studying, so I went to community college instead, right after high school. And I want to prove my family that I am meant for a greater purpose. Okay. So I joined the military.
So, was your family, I guess, did your parents kind of instill in you guys that a greater education is what equals more success. That's kind of what
They came to America for us to have a better education.
Okay.
For us to succeed in our life. Get a good grade in high school, get into good college, get a good job, make a lot of money, live with a stable family and income.
So, are you still in contact with your parents or your brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, not as often as I do after we all got married.
Okay.
I mean, we all live in a busy life, so I don't really contact them like often, but maybe like once a month or twice a month.
Okay. But you do feel that those are fruitful relationships?
Yeah. My brothers have been very supportive. Whenever I deployed, they took care of my kids and my wife.
Wow. So does that mean they live relatively close?
Yeah. But, I don't want to be a burden to them because they have their own family. They're married, so I don't want to bother them too often.
Why is it that you think visiting them would be a burden?
Well, I mean, they have their own life. I would like to, pre-schedule before I visit them. They might be, in some kind of busy work, and I don't want to interfere with them. I don't want to interfere them with their works.
Okay.
And they already took care of my kids multiple times while I was deployed, and I think I owe them a lot, and I haven't really paid back to them. So.
It's interesting that you say that because what I'm hearing is that you're a great brother that reaches out and still tries to keep that connection. And, they served you by taking care of your kids, but you served them by protecting this country.
Yeah, but not directly, though.
Not directly. Okay.
They supported me directly. I haven't really done anything to pay back to them, really.
So if you were to pay them back, what would that look like? What do you think you would want to do to try to pay them back?
Well, I bought my oldest brother a car for his birthday. I think it wasn't really for his birthday, I guess, but I bought him a car. Second brother, for his kids, I wrote a recommendation letter for their kids to go to West Point. So that's what I consider as paying back, something that only I can do for them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, both of those examples are very gracious things, and I'm sure they're thankful that you did that. I hope that you can see the worth in that and don't downplay what you did for them.
I mean, deployment's a year to a year and a half. And it really means a lot when somebody's taking care of your family for longer than a year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was also very gracious of them to step in and fill that role.
I mean, they had their own family. They have a big family, 3 kids for each. So.
Are your sons friends with their kids?
Oh yeah, often.
Do you think that your sons talk to your brother's kids about their relationship with you?
Oh, I never really asked them.
Never considered that. I guess I'm just wondering if your sons would verbalize to their cousins that your relationship is kind of distant.
I never really thought of it.
Never thought of it. Okay. Well, my thought process around this is trying to build up supports for you, and I think, if your nieces and nephews, if they were to kind of understand the dynamics of the relationship with you and your wife or you and your sons, they might, verbalize that to your brother, and we can just try to kind of build up around you and kind of let people know what's going on and what you're going through, and voices aside, just how we want to build these relationships and kind of repair any damages that have been there before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to dig a little deeper. You said you went to a community college?
Yeah.
You got your associate's degree?
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like for you?
In general, I mean, it wasn't something it's not something I'm proud of, to be honest. Because I couldn't get into 4-year college. I mean, all of my brothers got into Ivy League right after high school, and I couldn't get into any college. So I just went to a community college right next to my house, where it was paid for by a scholarship and grants. But I mean, it's just community college, so
it's still a degree.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't really have a specific major to that. It was just a general science.
Okay.
So, and my brothers, they got medical degree, PhD. And I don't know, my degree doesn't really meet the expectation of my parents. Because they sent me to prep school, they sent me to charter school. They transferred me 4 times when I was in high school to give me the best education. And I was just I struggle a lot with adjusting to different school every year. And I didn't do well in making friends or getting a good grade. Yeah.
So your parents placed a pretty heavy emphasis on school, and what I'm hearing from you is that you don't feel you met their expectations.
That's why I joined the Army.
Have you considered that maybe your interests were just different?
I don't know. I never was a school type of person. But my parents, they're both physicians, and they came to U.S. so they could, practice in U.S. and they had to work as a resident again. And they sacrificed for me a lot, and they often mention that, that they sacrificed their prosperous life in Poland so we can get better education. Of course, both of my brothers actually met the expectation by going to Grace College, excelled in their life. Well, I couldn't.
So I'm hearing you talk about the sacrifice that your parents made, but I don't think you're recognizing the sacrifice that you've made. Sacrifices you made in your lifetime thus far.
Well, for me, military was more like a new family, so I never felt like it was a sacrifice.
Okay.
I felt home whenever I deployed. I felt home whenever I was with my comrades. So.
It was a happy place for you.
Oh, it was definitely.
Yeah, not something. I guess a sacrifice kind of implies that you're losing something from it, but you don't feel that way.
I never lost anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious as to how you knew that your parents had these expectations of what kind of school to go to and how to.
Oh, they often verbally mentioned that they sacrificed their life for us. Okay. When I was little, they put a list of all the good colleges and on my door, so I can look at them to motivate me. And,
did you find that to be motivational?
It was pressure.
Pressure.
Yeah, I felt pressure. And when I realized when I knew that I wouldn't be able to get accepted to those colleges, that's when I began to be anxious about my life. Okay. And trying to find a path where I could get both, stable income and, I don't know, what should I say, fame or good reputation.
Yeah, recognition for what you're doing. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're talking about not being able to get a good job or get into good schools, but it seems like you have a pretty good job now.
Yeah, I guess so, but I'm still don't have a 4-year college degree. And I don't know, I want my kids to not follow my footsteps, but actually follow my brother's footsteps by going to 4-year college going to grad school.
Mm.
But I don't know how to advise them on that because I never had that experience before.
Mm. Well, I don't think you should downplay your education and the degree that you got because you still put in the time and effort, you still studied, you still have created this very meaningful life, and it's fantastic that your brothers did, get to go to four-year colleges and they've also created great careers. But you talk about how happy you were in the military.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds like you would be willing to kind of share that experience with your sons. Do you think they would be happy in the military as well?
No, they don't really like military, to be honest, because they think the military took me away from them.
Mm.
That's kind of sort of true, because I deployed multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I volunteered to deploy, too. And they think that if I hadn't joined the military, they would be more attached to me, spending more time with me.
So, if you had been able to go to a four-year college, then you wouldn't have entered into the military. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sensing that you think you would maybe have a better relationship with your sons if that were the case. Mm. So I'm hearing a lot of conflict. The military, this thing that brought you so much joy has also brought you some pain and discomfort now.
I mean, military is my identity, and I love military. Don't take me wrong. I love that place. It's my home. But at the same time, it's true that I sacrificed my family for military. And I feel bad. And I feel like if I were maybe a physician or a professor in university, maybe I didn't go military full-time, maybe reserve, do part-time, and spend more time with my family still.
Mm-hmm. If you could do it all over again, and let's say that you could get into a four-year college, what would you choose? Military or
I would still choose military. Not maybe full-time, but maybe part-time by going into reserve or National Guard. And still have that military background and life while having a regular civilian life with my family.
Okay. So you find both the military life and civilian life to be of importance.
Yeah, they're equally important.
Okay.
Definitely.
You found your happiness in the military, but that was kind of not pushed on you, but you felt that was your option to create the life you wanted?
Yeah, and then when I went there, nobody judged me. Everybody considered each other as a brother and sister. Everybody judged me based on my work rather than, my degree or my GPA in high school or SAT score. I got promoted, and everybody looked up to me.
Yeah. You were being built up. You were being recognized for the good parts of you, whereas strictly from a school standpoint, you kind of felt defeated. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think could have changed that? Is there anything that could have been different that would have helped you to view your education or view what you did succeed in at school? See that differently? Is there any person that you think could have changed how you viewed?
Maybe my parents.
Okay. So if your parents had maybe appreciated what you were good at instead of maybe pointing out other things you could have done, that might have been better for you.
I wish they didn't give me such pressure when I was little. I wish they didn't just set my life plan for me when I was little. Because I feel like I only had one option, becoming a physician or doctor like that. I don't think that's true.
And then when you didn't reach that,
I felt defeated.
Yeah. Okay. Does that feeling of defeat, is that something you still feel now?
Sometimes when I look at my brothers, when I see how flexible they are with their life, how often they spend time with their family, how they don't have to worry about, leaving their family or anything.
Okay. So there's some stress. There's some stress in that you don't have the same life as your brothers, and that you maybe didn't live up to what you think of as your parents' expectations, and that seems to be playing out now that you're away from the military and you're at home with your family and it's not the way you want it to be. Okay. So taking a little bit different spin on it, sounds like you spent quite a bit of time in the military. I'm wondering if you had any sort of major injuries or...
I got a back injury when I deployed from my last deployment. But that's it. I mean, yeah, I guess I am a little worn out, but still.
So physically, you're still feeling effects from...
But I feel like military made me definitely healthier. Like, I worked out every day. I did PT every day. If I hadn't joined the military, I would not be in this condition as I are now. So.
Is it something you still continue?
Yeah, sometimes I work out, regularly, but not as often as I was in the military. So.
Well, it's probably different, right?
Oh,
You don't need to be in the same type of shape and putting your body through the same stress.
I don't get that, positive peer pressure from my colleagues.
Okay.
Like, I always worked out with 60, 70 people in the morning, and now I'm working by myself. I don't get, pressure to run faster or
right.
heavier stuff.
Which makes sense. But I want to discuss this back injury a little bit more. Can you tell me what happened exactly? Or?
Yeah, so we did a rock march, and I was carrying a duffel bag and my weapon, sniper, which is usually heavier than the regular rifle. And one of my soldiers was falling behind, so I decided to carry his weapon for him. And then I did rock 5 miles with 2 weapons and a rock, and after that my back never felt the same way.
Wow. So you were doing something pretty courageous and
It's something that I'm supposed to do, I guess. I don't consider that as an act of valor or anything. It's just something I need to do.
Something you had to do. But still something that's pretty remarkable.
Okay, so I'm proud to share about my back pain. It's not something I hide or anything.
What is that back pain? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, is it bothering you to sit right now?
Nah, I take painkillers often. I get therapy. I get what do you call it? Kinesiology therapy. And yeah, it's not too bad. It's just hurting me a little bit if I'm sitting for too long, or if I'm driving for too long. It starts to bother me. Besides that, it's pretty fine.
How long have you been doing this therapy and taking these painkillers since you got back, or?
Yeah, since I got out since I got back from the deployment, and the VA is taking care of my therapy. So
how long has it been?
Since I got out from the military, so a few years.
Okay. Do you feel any better now than you did when you first got back physically?
What do you mean, got back?
From being deployed, yeah. I'm wondering, do you feel that this physical therapy is useful?
Yeah,
is it helping? Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely helping me.
So painkillers. What are you taking?
Ibuprofen.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't take it too often because it doesn't bother me too often. I just take it whenever I feel pain.
Okay.
So I have it with me all the time, but I don't take it occasionally.
So it's not an everyday? No, just when you really need it.
Yeah, just when I need it. Which is maybe once a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up because something that I was worried about was certain medications can have side effects that make you hear voices and things like that. So I'm glad we kind of got to rule that out. Further with substances, we talked about last week how you don't drink very often.
Nope.
Still the case? Still
the case.
Just maybe a drink or two when you're with your buddies?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen people getting kicked out from the military for doing DUI.
Mm.
I don't drink a lot.
Okay, so that's not something that you find a problem. Okay. Okay. So I have kind of covered all of the main premises that I wanted to. So the next thing that I kind of want to work on together is setting some goals for our next meeting and kind of just our sessions overall.
Okay.
That way we can kind of measure and see the success
Okay.
that's happening throughout all of this. So generally speaking, from both the first session and today, it seems like one of your main goals is to repair these relationships with some family members.
Yes.
Okay. So you do think would you consider that your main goal?
Yeah.
Okay. And within the goals, I like to set some objectives as to how you think we can start achieving that goal. So what are some different ways that you think that we can start making amends towards those relationships?
Maybe taking them out to dinner.
Okay.
One-on-one. Visiting their school. Maybe play sports with them. Watch movie with them.
Okay.
Rather than just go straight to try to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Creating an environment for conversation.
Okay. So these are some pretty deliberate things that you want to try to implement. Going out to dinner, going to their sporting events, going to school, going to their schools to visit them. I think those are all really great things to aim for. Is there one in particular that you would like to try to do before our next session?
I'll try to visit their football game.
Football game, okay. I think that's a really great idea. It'll give you something to talk about after too, to create, an environment that you guys could have a conversation. And I think it'll show them that you're really interested in their life. And from what I'm hearing, you are. You just haven't had the easiest time kind of showing that at this point. Okay. So let's remember to check in on that next time.
All
right. What other goals do you think are worthwhile?
I don't know. I want to get rid of this voice in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know, find a way to control this voice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, control the voices. And at this point, the coping strategies that you've used that have helped have been just to kind of remove yourself from the situation, go into a quiet room, focus on something else.
Yeah.
So would you like to try to find other coping mechanisms? Or
do you have any recommendation?
Yeah, so there are a couple different things we can work on. I also wanted to address with you that there are medications that we could look into that could potentially help.
Would they be covered by my VA insurance?
They should be.
Okay.
We can look into that together, most definitely.
Because I don't want to, cause more financial burden to my family. So
I understand prescriptions can be very costly, and we want to do everything that we can to not add any other stressors.
Would this prevent me to get promoted in my current job?
No.
Okay.
No. Your mental health is yours to deal with, yours to handle, and it's not your employer's business or in their right to ask about that. So don't let that be discouraging to you by any means. And it's just something for you to think about at this point. We can try to discuss it a little bit more next time, but just kind of wanted to see where you felt with that. So I'm glad that we can explore that a little bit more. So we have 2 goals at this point. Is there a third one or anything else that you think would be beneficial?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Paying invoices.
Okay. So we have 2 really great goals to work on. For next week, you're going to try to go to your son's sports game. In regards to the voices, I would like you to kind of think a little bit more about psychotropic medication. Okay? And we'll talk about that next week. I would also encourage you to try to come up with maybe another coping mechanism to shut those voices out. It's always great to add another option in your repertoire, something else that may help you.
So, do I just look it up on the internet to, like, how to coping?
So, my job is to help you come up with those types of things, but I guess I should have worded it better. I want you to just see what helps you in your day-to-day life right now besides just going to a quiet room. I'm just curious if there's anything else that you find that, oh wow, I did that and the voices calmed down, or I didn't hear those noises like I did. Okay? And then another kind of question that you don't need to give me an answer to, but I think is something important that helps us to set goals, is what do you want more of in your life? So like I said, you don't have to answer. It's more of a rhetorical thing, but I think that will help us to set maybe even more goals moving forward so that we can kind of see, okay, this is where we're at now and this is where we want to go and this is where we want to be. So we'll see if there's anything specific next week. Okay? So that all sounds good to me. Do you have any questions about anything we talked about today or anything you want me to? No? Everything sounds good. Okay. Well, good. Then I look forward to seeing you for our next session, and I would love to hear, how all your goal planning and those objectives are going for you. All right. See you then.